Welcome to ASN Kidney Week 2024. ASN thanks Vera Therapeutics for support of this plenary session.
Welcome to the forefront of medical innovation.
Right, ready to do this?
Welcome to nephrology, where excellence meets dedication. In nephrology, we're leading advancements in kidney transplants, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Patients are receiving new leases on life with cutting-edge techniques. With the latest advancements in EGFR, we're making strides in early detection and personalized treatment plans. Monitoring kidney health has never been more precise and effective. Imagine a world where artificial kidneys are a reality. Our teams are at the forefront, developing life-changing technologies that promise a future without dialysis. Recent legislative changes are paving the way for greater funding, research, and support for kidney health. Because of these efforts, our field is expanding faster than ever. Building off the success of nephrology giants like Barry Brenner, Bill Henrich, and other visionaries, there's an electrifying energy in nephrology today. We're more than a specialty. We're a movement, a community committed to transforming kidney care. Nephrology is where excellence meets dedication, because here, we're not just keeping pace with the future. We're creating it. Step into the future with us. Welcome to ASN Kidney Week 2024.
Please welcome the president of the American Society of Nephrology, Dr. Deidre Cruz.
Thank you. This town is Danville, Virginia. Nearly 160 years ago, Danville was the home of the last capital of the Confederate States of America. This was just before Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant in the Battle of Appomattox Courthouse, and that set into motion the end of the American Civil War. Almost 100 years after that, Danville was once again a focal point in events that would shape America's future. In the late spring of 1963, several local ministers organized peaceful demonstrations against segregation and racial discrimination in the city. But it didn't take long before police and deputized municipal workers turned fire hoses on and wielded nightsticks against the protesters, which injured dozens of people on what would later be referred to as Bloody Monday in the civil rights movement. In the same town, about 10 years later, I was born. And it probably wouldn't surprise you to learn that coming up in that environment at that time steeped me in thinking about issues of justice and injustice. Perhaps it would be impossible to be from such a place without being sensitized to the fact that some people were treated differently than others. And yet, I have to admit that I was surprised, shocked even, as a medical student some 40 years after Bloody Monday, when I first learned about the profound impact that societal injustices and other social factors can have on people's health. It began during a global health elective in Swaziland, now called Eswatini, a landlocked country surrounded by South Africa. There, I met a woman, similar to the person you see on the screen, who had traveled several miles by foot to be seen in the clinic where I and other medical students from the US were working alongside doctors and nurses who were physically and emotionally exhausted from caring for hundreds of patients with HIV infection. At the time, Swaziland had the highest HIV infection rate in the world, with more than a third of adults affected. When I met this woman and greeted her with the little bit of Siswati that I had learned, she told me about her symptoms of weakness, fever, and a productive cough. And after a series of tests, we diagnosed her with tuberculosis, presumed to be an opportunistic infection in the setting of HIV. We then told her that she, of course, would need to be admitted to the hospital for treatment. And it was then that our encounter took a surprising turn. Because of the cost associated with hospitalization, the equivalent of about $1 per day, but more than her family could afford, she would need to return home to ask her husband's permission to be admitted to the hospital. I'll never forget the look of hopelessness in her eyes as she left the clinic, never to return. As I continued on in my training in internal medicine and nephrology in Baltimore, Maryland, I was even more surprised to find that even in high-income countries like the US, injustice and social factors have an outsized influence on health, especially kidney health. I'm reminded of one of my long-standing patients, a middle-aged man treated with in-center hemodialysis for the kidney failure he learned he had only after he presented to our emergency department with an extremely elevated blood pressure and the worst headache he had ever had. When considering the racially segregated, disinvested community that he was born and raised in, with limited access to healthy foods and an under-resourced school system, it should come as no surprise that his kidney disease was detected late and that he struggled to control his blood pressure. We see people like my patient in the data we're all familiar with. Data showing profound disparities in kidney health and health care has been available to us for at least 3 decades. Since the early 1990s, we've known that Black Americans have higher rates of kidney failure than white Americans, and that this disparity is particularly striking among people who have low income levels. For more than 20 years, we've known about disparities in timely nephrology care and how this contributes to disparate rates of death among dialysis patients. And we've known for years that low socioeconomic status is linked with greater risk of kidney diseases and worse kidney care outcomes for both children and adults throughout the world. But today, there is good news for people like my patient. Because as a community, we've finally stopped simply documenting these disparities and injustices. I'd like to share with you several ways we're redefining the standard and actually doing something to address them. We're leading clinical trials of interventions addressing the effects of structural racism and other structural inequities and their impact on disparities in kidney health. We're testing approaches to prevent patients like mine from being referred late for nephrology care. We're advancing health policies to incentivize transplant centers to address disparities in kidney transplantation rates among socioeconomically disadvantaged individuals. We're moving closer to identifying a treatment for a genetically mediated form of kidney disease that disproportionately affects a historically marginalized population. And our work to remove race from the way we estimate kidney function is now guiding the work of other medical disciplines, re-examining their clinical algorithms and the part they play in advancing health equity. Clearly, we are redefining the standard. And while we've made these advances in health equity, we haven't stopped there. Our community, the kidney community, is having breakthroughs in our understanding of the very basic mechanisms of kidney diseases. Through an application of basic science approaches to investigate the prevalence and impact of anti-nephrin antibodies in patients with glomerular diseases, we now have a new understanding of the cause of minimal change disease and idiopathic nephrotic syndrome and why immunosuppression is effective for these kidney diseases. And technological advances in the analysis of single-cell transcriptomes, proteomes, and chromatin status in isolated cells and in intact kidney tissue are providing novel insights into the mechanisms of kidney disease progression. Not only are we uncovering mechanisms that underlie the progression of acute kidney injury to chronic kidney disease, we're identifying new ways to actually prevent acute kidney injury for patient populations at high risk. And this has been yet another blockbuster year of therapeutic advances for IgA nephropathy, focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, and diabetic kidney disease. And it's also been a blockbuster year for new Food and Drug Administration approvals in the kidney space. And for those who need a transplant, we're advancing xenotransplantation as an alternative to donated human kidneys, with work moving from decedents to first in live human studies over this past year. And we're learning more about the safety of transplanting kidneys from deceased donors who had HIV to recipients living with HIV. And what's more, we've gone big with our trials, leveraging electronic health records and pragmatic approaches to identify and randomize large numbers of patients in clinical settings to test our interventions at scale. And these are just a few examples of the many, many ways that our community is redefining the standard for our field. But if I seem only cautiously optimistic, it's because there is still so much work to be done. 1 out of every 10 people worldwide is still living with kidney diseases, in most cases while unaware of it. And while that number can sometimes seem a bit obscure, that's one person enjoying their milestone birthday celebration at a dinner party, a table for 10. And for families like mine who are disproportionately impacted by kidney diseases, that could be as many as 2 or 3 people seated at that table. They are depending on us to redefine the standard so that their disease does not progress to kidney failure or other complications of kidney diseases, and so that others' kidney health can be protected. We need not look further than our own workforce to find opportunities to redefine the standard. And here's something we should all take a moment to celebrate. The recently released annual ASN Nephrology Fellow Survey found that 9 out of 10 fellows would recommend nephrology to medical students and residents. And this year, we've seen a more than 10% increase in nephrology fellowship applications to US programs as compared to last year. And if this trend continues, it should strengthen our resolve to continue to attract people into our field and to build and better support a highly qualified workforce in numbers adequate to meet the demands for specialized kidney care. As authorities in kidney medicine, our workforce and training efforts over this past year have been enhanced by our reaffirming that people living with kidney diseases and their families are best supported when we partner with others who are also deeply committed to their care. ASN partnered with the American Society of Transplantation to successfully propose that the US-based Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education accredit transplant nephrology fellowships, a move expected to advance transplant nephrology as a distinct medical subspecialty and foster broad nationwide adoption of uniformly rigorous, high-quality transplant nephrology training. And a partnership with the American Nephrology Nurses Association is revealing shared challenges and opportunities to support and demonstrate the value of the kidney care team, from increasing medical and nursing student exposure to nephrology to identifying ways that nephrologists and nephrology nurses can move upstream from primarily working together in the dialysis setting to leading efforts to actually prevent kidney diseases. We are redefining the standard of the partnership between nephrologists and nephrology nurses. And even while we continue to have shifting laws and perspectives on the topic, we must continue with urgency to advance inclusive excellence in our field. Achieving a kidney care and research workforce that better reflects populations affected by kidney diseases simply matters too much for too many, and it's the right thing to do. Redefining the standard for kidney care also means equipping nephrologists and other clinicians caring for people with kidney diseases with timely and practical information to guide them in the care of their patients. This responsibility is particularly important given the exciting pace at which new pharmacologic and non-pharmacologic therapies are being developed in kidney care. ASN has been unique among medical specialty societies in that it has not produced clinical practice guidelines. But as a new initiative this year, ASN Kidney Health Guidance encourages high-quality, person-directed care across the full spectrum of kidney health and diseases, from screening and early detection to diagnosis, treatment, and palliative care. The first guidance on the very timely topic of obesity and kidney diseases was published just last month. To redefine the standard for kidney health, we will also need to leverage emerging tools that can support our work across numerous domains. As we will hear more about later this morning from our plenary speaker, augmented or artificial intelligence offers unprecedented opportunities for both precision and expansion of our work. But in my informal polling of people I encounter, there seems to be nearly as much fear about AI in the broader community as there is excitement. While AI will help clinicians and researchers improve the lives of many patients, concerns remain about who could be left behind or even harmed by these tools. Following the recommendations of the ASN Augmented Intelligence and Digital Health Task Force, ASN has now launched the Partnership for Responsible AI in Kidney Health to assist the kidney community in navigating the rapidly changing augmented intelligence landscape. The partnership's efforts will cover applications in acute kidney injury, chronic kidney disease, and dialysis, with a careful consideration of impacts on advancing kidney health equity and healthcare justice. And importantly, as Dr. Nav Tangri asserts, the partnership will center on the nephrologist and building AI for nephrology rather than nephrology working around existing AI solutions. With so many advances in kidney research and innovation this past year, many of us, I'm certain, have been excited to share these advances with the young scientists with whom we have the privilege to work. In my case, many of these future leaders have just completed their undergraduate education, and they often ask me, why kidney? And I will admit that I do delight in sharing with them my story of the multitude of forces that drew me to a career as a nephrologist scientist. And in my efforts to persuade them that they should pursue a similar path, I'm always able to promise them with confidence at least 3 things should they choose to pursue kidney health research. 1, their work will impact a population with a great need for research and innovation. 2, they will never run out of questions to answer. And 3, they will find the global community of kidney scientists to be incredibly welcoming and collaborative. But what I have not been able to promise them is that there will be adequate public investment in research in kidney diseases relative to other diseases and in proportion to their burden in society. Redefining the standard for kidney health research requires that we galvanize the kidney community to advocate for increased and coordinated funding for kidney research across the entire spectrum, starting with basic or fundamental research that improves our understanding of the kidney in health and disease, and extending to implementation research that informs how we actually get effective therapies and treatment strategies to the people who need them and may benefit most from them. Chaired by ASN Secretary Dr. Samir Parikh, the ASN Transforming Kidney Health Research Blue Ribbon Panel is developing a bold and comprehensive research plan that identifies existing and emerging areas of opportunity for kidney health research across the entire U.S. federal government. Through partnership with several organizations in the kidney community, the goal is to accelerate the development of knowledge that will deliver better diagnostics, therapies, and tools for preventing and treating kidney diseases. Importantly, and most relevant to that promise I have not been able to make to my mentees, the panel will also highlight the investment needed to support the research and the people who will conduct it. As we have been reminded through reports from this year, kidney health is heavily influenced by both big P policies, such as those at the global and national levels, and little p policies at the local and health system levels. For us to continue redefining the standard, we should take Precious McCowan's advice and engage in strategic and efficient advocacy for policy changes through uplifting the voices and centering the experiences of people living with kidney diseases. The good news is that kidney health is one of few bipartisan issues prioritized by the last 3 presidential administrations in the U.S. Our opportunities for advocacy are vast, and we have seen their impact in just this past year. With the placement of ASN's inaugural health policy scholar in residence, Dr. Suzanne Watnick, who has worked closely with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, our ties with the federal government have strengthened, and we're seeing continued commitment to kidney health. Just last month, HHS launched the Kidney X Sustainability Prize, an over $7 million challenge to drive meaningful change in the sustainability of kidney care. This challenge is the latest initiative from the Kidney Innovation Accelerator, or Kidney X, a public-private partnership between HHS and ASN, and the innovations from it cannot come soon enough. As we continue to experience extreme weather events and their impact on people living with kidney diseases. It's hard, after all, to receive dialysis when your local dialysis center is underwater or you're a home hemodialysis patient with electrical power lines down in your neighborhood. Lessons we've learned across the globe this year. We are redefining the standard for advocacy by leveraging partnerships and responding rapidly to new threats to kidney health and our ability to provide optimal kidney care. For example, in just these past few weeks, ASN has responded to the impact of Hurricane Helene on fluids needed for dialysis care, resulting in a rapid response from the Biden administration. In transplantation, under ASN past president Dr. Michelle Josephson's leadership, ASN advocated successfully for the largest ever funding increase to the Health Resources and Services Administration to carry out the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network Modernization Initiative. And last month, the first ever multi-vendor contract awards to modernize the US organ transplant system were announced, and they're expected to improve the transparency, the performance, and the efficiency of the organ donation and transplantation system for the more than 100,000 people awaiting organ transplants. ASN again partnered with the National Kidney Foundation, this time to urge the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network to remove race from the Kidney Donor Profile Index used to evaluate the suitability of a kidney for transplantation. And there is optimism that this policy change will actually advance equity and lead to an increase in the number of kidneys available for transplant. Also, in partnership with NKF and other members of the community, ASN continues to support advocacy for uninsured individuals' ability to access scheduled kidney failure care by sharing state-level strategies and uplifting the voices of people facing this monumental barrier to their survival. At a global level, ASN has partnered with the European Renal Association and International Society of Nephrology to urge the World Health Organization to recognize kidney disease as a major non-communicable disease responsible for premature death. With this recognition, governments around the world may be more likely to dedicate the appropriate attention and resources to alleviate the burden and support advancements to improve the lives of the 850 million people worldwide who are living with kidney diseases. As kidney professionals and advocates, we have the authority and the mandate to redefine the standard for kidney health. Because in fact, we are the standard bearers. But what I want to do now is to turn off the slides just for a minute, just to talk to you. Because if all of this sounds like a lot, it's because it is. But what I want you to do is imagine yourself going home after Kidney Week. Imagine sitting in your office alone, asking yourself, what am I going to do today as the standard bearer with my knowledge, my platform, and my influence? How will I promote fairness and justice in kidney health? What is the next discovery I will make? How will I engage and prepare the next generation of kidney professionals? What will I do to advocate for policy change? And finally, how will I deliver high-quality care that improves both the quantity of years and the quality of moments for people living with kidney diseases? There's a lot of work to be done. But we've been doing it. You've been doing it. You're redefining the standard. Thank you. It has been the singular honor of my career to have this historic opportunity to serve as ASN president this year. And I have so many people to thank for their partnership, their friendship, and support, beginning with my fellow counselors, who are each extraordinary leaders, and including the incomparable ASN staff. Yes. and also including the many volunteers, including those serving on the Kidney Week Education Committee this year. It's these volunteers who really give of their time to drive ASN's mission. And this year would not have been possible for me without the unwavering support of my nephrology colleagues and research team at Johns Hopkins. And lastly, I owe a debt that I will never be able to repay to my loving and fortunately forgiving family, including my parents who are here with us today. Thank you all. Each year, ASN recognizes companies that support society programs and activities through ASN's Corporate Support Program. Their generosity and commitment help ASN provide the highest standard of educational and scientific programs to thousands of kidney professionals. This year, 27 companies participated. I'd like to personally thank Amgen, Novartis, Novo Nordisk, Otsuka, and Travere Therapeutics for their commitment to improving kidney health worldwide. The ASN President's Medal highlights individuals who have helped ASN advance its mission and made significant contributions to the kidney community.
The practice of nephrology is a complicated business.
This is an evolving field, and the opportunities to contribute expand each year.
ASN supports the family of people who are interested in helping patients with kidney disease. The ASN President's Medal is the highest honor that the ASN bestows on anyone. It is the only presidential medal that we give out.
It's aimed at awarding positive recognition to someone who has made lives better for individuals suffering from kidney disease, and that goes beyond direct caregiving by nephrologists.
You have people that have contributed at every aspect of the disease and the community's effort to fight the disease.
It takes so many people outside of the nephrology world to actually make things happen.
I was privileged to be at the beginning of giving this award. Dr. Karen Campbell was the awardee. She had been the distinguished executive director of the society.
It's been a privilege.
Thank you very much for the President's Award.
I am very proud of the awardees over the years because it reflects those individuals who, by being in alignment with the general purpose of the society, have made the most contributions.
I think as an organization, ASN has a responsibility to do everything it can to underscore the contribution that these individuals are making, both to kidney disease, but also to ASN as a society.
The individuals who get these medals are those who aren't afraid to speak up and fight for patients with kidney disease.
Good evening, everyone. I am deeply honored and humbled to receive this Advocacy Award from the American Society of Nephrology. This recognition is truly meaningful to me as it reflects the collective commitment that we all share to improving the lives of those affected by kidney disease, particularly the communities who are disproportionately affected by the disease. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to ASN for not only presenting me with this award, but for continuing to lead the way in advancing kidney care and advocating for those who are in need. Your efforts inspire all of us who labor in this field, and I am proud to be a part of such a dedicated and passionate community. December the 19th, 2023, I celebrated the 20th anniversary of my kidney transplant. It is mind-blowing to think of everything that I would have missed if I was not able to have the transplant and receive quality care. I was able to play for 4 additional years in the National Basketball Association. I became the Miami Heat's all-time leading scorer. After that, D. Wade broke my record. I won 3 NBA championships, 1 as a player and 2 as an executive. My jersey was retired. I was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame and FIBA Hall of Fame. I published a book. My foundation, the Mourning Family Foundation, impacted the South Florida community in innumerable ways, including building a 56,000 state-of-the-art charter school, youth center, parent resource center. I've also built 11 affordable housing complexes in South Florida. And these are just the tangible accomplishments. There's no way to quantify the intangible impact of me being able to live the last 20 years advocating equity in healthcare and housing and in education. I was taught as a child to say please and thank you, to pay my debts, to help others when I can. As I recovered from the transplant and rebuilt my body, my career, and my life, I sought ways to say thank you and to help others, like paying it back and paying it forward. I needed to honor those who helped me heal, while also sounding this alarm about this silent killer. To do this, I used what I had, my status, the platform that basketball built for me as a professional athlete and an Olympian, which equaled influence in this global platform. It's not easy to go public when you live a private life. My personal life is my personal life. Deciding to tell the world that I'm not Superman, that I'm ill and I would need a life-saving operation, it was not easy. But I went public and I shared my diagnosis with the world to generate energy and raise awareness of kidney disease, raise awareness of healthy lifestyle choices and the importance of organ donation. Then I asked my friends, my colleagues, and other professionals. I asked them to donate money to help find a cure for the disease. I was this picture of health. So when everybody saw me, they were shocked that I had to go through CKD. They were shocked that I was sick. I felt like I could leap tall buildings in a single bound, but at that time I used that moment and solicited friends and colleagues of mine to help raise awareness and to help raise money towards a cure. We raised $2 million to start the Glomerular Research Institute at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. When we look at the statistics, it's staggering to see how many Americans are actually affected by the disease. 37 million adults are affected by chronic kidney disease, with millions more at risk. Over 800,000 people in the United States are living with end-stage renal disease, requiring dialysis or kidney transplant just to survive. In 2023, approximately 28,000 kidney transplants were performed in the U.S. Wow. The most common type of organ transplant. Medicare spends over $120 billion, with a B, annually on kidney care, accounting for around 20% of all Medicare spending. Every year, kidney disease kills more people than breast cancer or prostate cancer. And I had prostate cancer 7 months ago. By the grace of God, I'm still here talking to you today. About 1.3 million people die from kidney disease every year. Kidney disease is the 10th leading cause of death globally, and it's expected to become the 5th leading cause by 2040. Every day, 12 to 17 people die waiting for a kidney. Consistently fighting anything is exhausting. It's exhausting emotionally and it's time-consuming. Fighting disease is even more the same. But we must keep our hand to the plow. We must push through during times of fatigue and exhaustion. Anything worth having in life is worth working for. Some of you may be feeling this way today, but I encourage you to rest when you get tired. But don't quit. Remember, pain is temporary, but if you quit, quitting lasts forever. I spent the years since my transplant educating the community on how to prevent chronic and acute illnesses. At most of my events, we include blood pressure and other health screenings. We share fun ways to stay active, like walking and dancing, host cooking demonstrations to emphasize that good nutrition is not only sustains life, but good food and good nutrition can also help your body heal. Our endeavor is to educate people on how to avoid hypertension and diabetes, two of the silent killers that lead many people into kidney disease. I've also been an outspoken advocate for patients, encouraging doctors to build in time for education during every patient visit. And doing all of this, when I got tired, I rested, and then I kept pushing. As a health community, we have done a lot, but there's still more to do. We cannot stop until this ugly disease is behind us, and it starts with you, the most brilliant medical professionals in the world. This award is not mine alone. It's a testament to the teamwork and the collaboration of so many individuals who have supported me in this journey. From my colleagues, family, and physicians, to the patients and families who remind us why this work matters every day. I owe this achievement to all of you. To the society, I want to say thank you. Thank you for the critical role that you play in shaping the future of kidney care by supporting nephrology professionals, advancing research, advocating for policies that benefit patients with kidney disease. I honor your efforts today. Because of you, they are survivors of kidney disease. As a 20-year transplant recipient and a survivor, I dream of a world one day without kidney disease, as you do. With ASN's continued and coordinated efforts, this dream may one day come true. Thank you again for this amazing award and for all that you do. And God bless you all.
While we certainly wish he could have been here with us in person to accept the President's Medal in person, please join me in congratulating Alonzo Mourning with the ASN President's Medal. And now I'd like to welcome Dr. Tamara Isakova, Kidney Week Education Co-Chair, to introduce our state-of-the-art lecturer.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning. It's been my distinct pleasure to serve as the Kidney Week Committee Co-Chair alongside Dr. Rashid Badageshan. Thank you for joining us here in San Diego. Our first state-of-the-art lecture will be delivered by Dr. David Rhew on accelerating healthcare innovation in nephrology with artificial intelligence. Dr. Rhew is Microsoft Global Chief Medical Officer and Vice President of Healthcare. He has served as Microsoft's International Coordinator for the Pandemic Response, where he worked with WHO to develop their World Health Data Hub, CDC to stand up their vaccine data lake, and US states to roll out COVID-19 vaccines. Dr. Rhew is adjunct professor at Stanford University. He holds 6 US technology patents that enable authoring, mapping, and integration of clinical decision support into electronic health records. And he has been recognized as one of the 50 most influential clinician executives by modern healthcare. Dr. Rhew has also served as CMO and Vice President at Samsung and CMO and Senior Vice President at Zinx Health. He has served on National Quality Forum's Executive CSEC Board and chaired the Consumer Technology Association's Health Technology Board. He currently sits on AdvaMed's Digital Health Board and Governing Committee for NEST-CC, the Medical Device Advisory Group for FDA, CMS, and NIH. Welcome, Dr. Rhew.
Wow, look at this. This is amazing. Thank you all for all that you do. It's a real privilege and an honor to be here. In fact, you know what? If you don't mind, I'd like to take a selfie with you guys, if you don't mind. This is just, I mean, this crowd, no one's going to believe. So let's do it here. Okay, well, you know what? We're going to have everyone here move over to the side, if you don't mind. Okay, no, forget it. Well, let me just do it this way here. Wow, look at that. Okay. Okay. One of the most common questions that I'm asked is, what does the Global Chief Medical Officer for Microsoft do? And in fact, that's a question that my parents would like to know the answer to as well. And I think the best way for me to explain is I'm a bit of a translator between all that's going on in the technology world and all that we do on the clinical side. Because we know there's tremendous opportunity, but we don't oftentimes see that technology translate to things that we can use on a day-to-day basis. So to give you a little background, how did I get into this position? If we go back in time, in 1988, I was a computer science major in undergraduate. And at the time, you have to write a thesis. And my thesis was AI in healthcare. So again, keep in mind, this is 1988. There wasn't a whole lot of AI. So it's what we typically call hallucinations. A lot of hallucinations were going on there. But it turns out that now a lot of people care about it. Now back then, no one really cared about it. In fact, my advisor didn't care about it. The medical school people that I was applying for didn't care. But why is it that people care about it today? Well, there's three things that have happened. And the first is that the technology has gotten so much better. The capabilities around the technology, I think we always talk about AI, but there's a level of infrastructure that supports that. The data, computations, the ability for us to be able to better manage the data, that's just been incredible. And it's allowed us to be able to do things that we could never have done before. The second is that our expectations regarding technology have dramatically increased. Whether it's around convenience, just trying to make sure that you get that right information at the right time, ease of use, but also equity. We know that we have to raise the bar in terms of what technology needs to do. But the third is that we have problems in healthcare that are really big, bigger than any type of app can solve. And it does require us to think about how we can apply technology in ways that will help us address some of these big problems. And I'm talking about things like cost of care, health equity, clinician burnout, access to care, access to affordable health care. These are things that we struggle with. But until we actually figure out ways that we can leverage all the tools that are available to us, we're not going to be able to solve those problems. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually talk a bit about how we can solve some of these big problems with technology, and in particular, artificial intelligence. So to do that, we have to actually ground ourselves in terms of what does artificial intelligence mean? Because if you were to ask one person, you ask another person, I think everyone's going to kind of come up with a slightly different perspective. But AI was a term that was first coined in 1956, and all it really meant was that the computer is going to act like a human. So back in 1956, we didn't have a whole lot to go with, so a lot of it was if-then statements, algorithms, and we were trying to figure out how we can apply that. But it has progressed pretty dramatically, and I sometimes hear people say, oh, AI is just a bunch of if-then algorithms. Well, maybe in 1956, but we now have something called AI machine learning, which allows us to be able to have the computer learn from the data and learn from its mistakes and learn from other algorithms. And that process of constant learning makes this something that can do things that humans normally do. So taking unstructured forms of data, your voice, an image, a video, those are things that previously only a human could interpret that, but now the computer can interpret it just as well, if not better and more consistently than humans. And because of that, we can actually convert that unstructured form of data into a structured form that allows us to be able to do certain things. And that was something that has progressed pretty dramatically, and I'm going to share with you some examples of why that is something that's extraordinary. But the thing that's also happened is that we've seen that in addition to the machine learning algorithms, we've seen that the network of information that's out there, we sometimes call them neural networks, has expanded to the point where we can actually now look across a vast amount of data, and I'll use the internet as an example, where we can then associate certain concepts together and we can put, from a mathematical perspective, greater weighting on that. And if you were to anticipate, let's say you're on a node or a concept and you wanted to figure out what's that next node or that next concept that is most related to that, we can do that now. And it's called generative AI. It's anticipating that next word and that next concept. So all of that was great because that was happening and a lot of data scientists were getting excited, but people weren't getting excited, patients, doctors, no one else, until something else happened. And that something else was that we put a user interface in front of all this technology, this reasoning engine, and that user interface allowed us to be able to just type in or talk, and it understood what we were saying, and it came back with a response that was allowing us to be able to do certain things. So what are the things that we can do with this interface and this reasoning engine? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can solve a problem that I think every one of us has had, which is when you're seeing a patient, you have to actually then go to the computer and you have to type in all this information into the medical record. I don't know how much time it takes each one of you, but it certainly takes some individuals a lot of time throughout the day if you add it all up. Well, we now have an ability called ambient clinical intelligence, which allows us to be able to actually just have a normal conversation with the patient. And that entire conversation is not only transcribed, but it's organized into a clinical progress note. And so when you're done with the conversation, you go back to your computer and boom, the note's there. It's written. It's not just a transcription of I said this, they said that. It is literally in the form of a SOAP note or an H&P, and it gives us time to be able to spend time talking to the patient. It's extraordinary. It saves a doctor about 50% of the time amount required to document to the EHR. Now there's technologies that are being applied for nurses so they can actually talk into the computer and just all of that gets put into a flow sheet. And so that's extraordinary. It's allowing us to be able to rethink. But that technology, if you break it down into the different components, is not just about generative AI. Because that's where we oftentimes say, oh, it's AI that's solving it, and then we say it's generative AI. So let's think about the very first thing that happens. First thing that happens is the computer has to figure out who is talking. That's actually AI that's running in the background. So if I say something, the patient says something, the patient's child or the siblings, it's really interesting. It knows exactly who's talking. And then the second thing is it has to take those words and it has to put them into something that the computer can understand that's medically relevant. So in medical informatics, we call them terms like SNOMED or ICD-10 codes and a variety of different things that allow us to be able to help with billing and help with understanding how we can run decision support. But that's also being done, and that's traditional AI ML. The thing that people focus on, though, is the fact that now we can organize it into the note, which is generative AI, and then there's integration into the medical record. So what we've done is we've actually broken the problem up into a series of steps, and we're applying AI at different steps. And sometimes it's different AI, but it's truly integrated. So when you think of AI, don't think of it as one thing, but think of it as a set of tools that allow us to be able to solve problems, but if we break it up into the sub-steps, we can create an integrated workflow. Now that in itself for ambient clinical is remarkable because we can now save a lot of time, and I think many people are excited about this type of technology. But there's even a greater opportunity. That entire conversation that was captured, we can run other AI to be able to do other things. So one of those things is using voice as a biometric. So these are results that were shared to us by Intermountain Healthcare, where they are now also, in addition, as the clinician and the patient are having that conversation, of course with their consent, both consent, they're using voice as a biometric, and they're analyzing, trying to figure out, is the person stressed? Are they anxious? Are they depressed? And in fact, they are looking at that and comparing that to standard assessment tools. So rather than asking the patient, fill out this form, or do you have depression and things like that, it's figuring it out, and it's actually quantifying it. And it's also being done for the clinicians. So you can actually assess for clinician burnout over time. So it's extraordinary because we actually can do this using voice as a biometric. It's being used for conditions like COPD, Parkinson's, a variety of other ways. So neuromuscular diseases can also be managed. So thinking now about all the possibilities that can occur once you've actually captured it, digitize it, and run AI. Extraordinary. Let me give you another example of some extraordinary capabilities that AI can provide clinicians. And I'm going to start with imaging, because imaging is an area where, if you think about it, there's a lot of things that we use imaging for, but we could be doing a lot more with it. And in fact, one of the things that we could do is we can completely change the paradigm of what is preventive care, what is proactive care. So I think every one of us has seen a patient when they come into your office or the clinic or even the ER, and you're like, gosh, I wish you would have come in earlier. I wish you would have told me that this was going on. And whether it's a heart, stroke, dialysis, you're always saying there's so much we could have done earlier on. I wish I would have known, or I wish you would have come back. And the reality is we don't have effective tools. It's education, it's promotional, public service, advocacy, it's things like vaccinations, screening tools, and that's our arsenal. Well, we have another very powerful tool in our arsenal, and that's artificial intelligence. We can screen large populations and identify individuals before they even know that they have disease. In fact, if you think about our health system today, how is it built? It's based on individuals that know they have a condition, or they have a symptom, or they have a routine clinic follow-up. They see the clinician, and then they're in the process. And so that's what healthcare is. It's everything that we see in front of us. Now let's think of all the patients that we do not see, the patients that didn't come into the clinic and didn't come into the hospital. These are individuals that are at risk for disease. These are individuals that have a disease but they don't realize it. And these are individuals that have a disease and they don't realize it's progressed. That's the group I'm talking about. That's the group that we wish we could intervene on. Well, we can. And I'm going to start with a few examples. So the first is the eye. I think many of us have, if not, probably all of us, have had an eye exam at some point. Your kids have had exams. It's recommended for Medicare patients to have one regularly. And I'm just talking about the simple, put your chin on the machine, put the little lenses over, is it better, is it worse? That's what I'm talking about, just getting for eyes checking. Well, in that process, you have an ability to capture an image. Now, traditionally, that image has been locked on the computer on that machine. It's called an OCT. And we now have an ability to bring it to the cloud and run AI on top of it. So what can you do when you run AI on it? Well, you can do a lot. You can actually screen for diabetic retinopathy, also cardiovascular disease, chronic kidney disease, and a variety of others. Let me give you some data on the chronic kidney. So the algorithms right now that are looking at the eye to screen for chronic kidney disease, they're finding that they can have high levels of performance with area under the curve of anywhere between 0.2 to 0.3, depending on what your base standard is, whether it's eGFR or the urine albumin creatinine ratios. These are things that are now starting to realize that there's AI that can be applied on top of these images and allow us to be able to identify individuals. Now, we're not saying that we're diagnosing kidney disease. All we're saying is that these are individuals that if I were to say who needs to be seen earlier versus later, I'd put them at the top of the list because there's a good chance that something's going on. And that's what we're talking about. We're trying to find individuals who are out there in the masses and don't realize that things are going on, but potentially need to be addressed. There was a really interesting study that was published in Nature, and what they found was that in the eye, there's something called a choroidal and retinal layer. And that layer actually is dynamic, consistent with the eGFR. In fact, what they found was that when an individual has a declining glomerular filtration rate, they actually have thinning of the choroidal and retinal thickness in the eye. And here's the remarkable part. When they got transplanted, the thickness increased. It was a dynamic indicator of what was going on in the kidney, but seen in the eye. We know this is happening with other conditions like cardiovascular disease, you see the arterioles, you can see it at the micron level. You can see the same thing with the nerve vessels. That's why you're seeing a large number of research in the eye using the eye as a mechanism to identify things like MS and Alzheimer's. But we're now starting to recognize that there's a significant opportunity to potentially use areas like the eye to help identify individuals that could potentially be at risk and use that as the prognostic indicator. So this is where we're starting to think about. We're starting to think about, okay, can we capture information from other sources and now apply AI on top of it? Well, one of the sources that we have that we don't really take advantage of is the electronic health record. So we say, well, if they've seen a primary care doc or they're in the clinic, of course they're going to be referred to us because they've got obvious evidence of chronic kidney disease or they're at risk for chronic kidney disease. Well, interestingly enough, I actually built my entire career around looking at variations in care and gaps in care. Care doesn't occur always the way that we anticipate it will. And in fact, in many cases, we found that if you look at large electronic health record databases and you apply AI on top of it, and you look for diagnosis, patients with ICD-10 codes that are associated with either individuals that would be at risk for disease, chronic kidney disease, or actually have it, but don't have the diagnosis, we find massive gaps in care. And so AI can actually be used to find these individuals already in the system that have the disease but are not actually being adequately treated or referred. And that's an opportunity for us to close those gaps in care. It happens very frequently when you have a disjointed health system and the primary care is not necessarily well coordinated with the specialty care. And I think the guidelines, as you start building out guidelines, you'll realize you can apply those guidelines into the electronic health record database and find these individuals. And in fact, what they have done is they have started doing those things, trying to find those gaps in care, and they're picking up things such as cancers that have been missed. They're picking up things such as cachexia associated with those cancers, and even things like lupus nephritis. What we found was that there was a 2,300% increase if you used AI to pick up lupus nephritis within an electronic health record that was not previously identified. And of course, this has a huge impact on the populations that oftentimes don't get seen regularly or to have infrequent visits. We're talking about the underserved, the vulnerable populations. In fact, there's a huge opportunity to improve health equity by just simply looking at the information that we have available today. Now, one of the things that everything I've talked about is diagnosis, identification of individuals. I want to shift gears and talk about prognosis and thinking about how can we improve those outcomes. If we think about that, it's not then about one data set. It's actually about a lot of different data sets. And as I think many of you are well aware, as a healthcare provider, we see a patient rather infrequently. They'll come in, maybe some of them with dialysis, obviously a little more frequently, but we don't see them as regularly as we'd like. And because of that, our snapshot into their overall health is limited. But if you think about all the other things that are going on, the thing that drives most of the behavior is what we saw in the video, human behavior, like your daily diet, your exercise. All those are very important, including sleep, medication adherence, smoking, all the different types of we'll call lifestyle behaviors. They have a huge impact on your overall outcome. And then, of course, your genes, your genetics, which we haven't even talked about. This whole concept of omics, looking at all the different parameters around that. That's a huge determinant. And where you live. We talked about social determinants of health. There's so many interrelations between that, is being perhaps maybe the greatest predictor of your overall outcome because of all the access to the resources and the limitations that you may have in certain areas, and then certain environmental exposures. And if you put it all together, you're like, wow, we only have a small snapshot, but we are actually capturing all that information in different areas. It could be in different areas within the hospital, like different imaging, but what we're also finding is that we need to somehow pull that all together. Now, if we just simply took all that information and threw it into, we'll call it a data lake, there'd be a lot of work for individuals to be able to try to sort through all of that and figure out how this all works. So there actually has to be a platform, and I think when we think of AI, we think of it more in terms of just the capabilities of AI, but we don't realize that there's another component, it's around the data. And so the analogy I like to use is, if you think about AI as or the overall opportunity to use AI as a sports car, we've got a new engine, and that engine is extremely powerful. We've upgraded, but we need fuel, and that fuel is the data. And the data cannot be crude oil coming from the ground. It has to be curated. It has to be annotated. It has to be processed and linked to appropriate codes, or transformed from the medical informatics world. We're talking about things like HL7, FHIR, OMOP, and those are conversions that have to occur. But once you have all of that, and you're properly managing the data, and you're pulling these different sources together, we can apply AI on it and do three things that are really important relative to prognosis. The first is identification of risk. We can identify who are the higher risk, medium and lower risk, and a whole strata behind. The second is we can do cohorting. We can find patients just like you and look longitudinally across their trajectory and say, I wonder if a patient like you has had this treatment and what that course is. The information's in the data set, but rarely have we done a randomized clinical trial on that because it's a very individualized question we're asking. But if we had that data set and we had the ability, we could actually predict and find those patients just like you. And the last is around prediction. And this is what we want to know. We want to know how long is it going to take you before you actually get to that particular outcome, whether it's a good outcome or it's a bad outcome. And that's what we want from the data. We want the data to inform us about what we can do so we can apply our limited resources most appropriately. And that is where we're struggling right now. We are sometimes doing it based on protocol, but it really needs to be individualized. So what can we do? Now, if we have that information, what we can do and solve some really important things. First and foremost, I was given the opportunity to speak to the American Cancer Society. I spoke to their board about what is it that you can do to reduce mortality in the area of cancer. And there were 3 things I said you should focus on, or that we as a society should. First, continue your efforts to try to identify the cures for cancer. That's going to have the biggest impact overall. But the second are real tangible things. Gaps in care we have today. There are a lot of gaps in care. Find ways that we can close those. And the other is get patients onto clinical trials. If you think about where the best opportunities to save lives, it's on precision medicine, and it's in the medications and the treatments that are right now in the clinical trials. But the problem is patients are not getting into clinical trials. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And most importantly, patients don't realize, and providers don't realize, that these are patients that are eligible for the trial at the moment they need it. We need to find a better way to match patients, and we're starting to do that. We're starting to apply tools. Now, I'm not sure if this is a video is going to work, but there's a series of tools that are now available that are something that any clinician, any researcher, any organization can do, and it works in 2 different ways. You can, if you have a database of patients and you know your clinical trial that you're looking for, it'll find it, it'll match it, like that, instantaneously. Similarly, you can do the same thing where patients, if they want to find a trial, they can start entering information and it can go find that trial for them. But just given the limited time, let me just skip over to the next. One other thing I want to talk about, and this ties back into one of the concerns we have about artificial intelligence. We know it can do amazing things, but the reality is, if people don't trust it, they're not going to use it. Patients won't want it, providers won't want it, healthcare organizations, states, governments, no one's going to want it. Trust is at the center of how we have to apply this. So a group of organizations, I'd say up to right now 45 large health systems across the country, academic medical centers, and even rural hospitals are all participating in an initiative called the Trustworthy and Responsible AI Network. I think many of your organizations are probably within this group. And they're trying to answer 4 key questions. Do you know all the AI that's running in your system today? If not, you probably need something called an online registration portal with something called model cards to be able to identify it. Second, and most critical, have you tested those algorithms, those models, on your own local data sets? Not just before, but also after, with an ongoing assessment of how it's working. Not just the model, how it's performing, but the outcomes associated with that. Because if we don't do that, we will not be understanding the true implications. Now, to do that is a little bit more than just simply looking at the outcome. Outcomes are associated with not only the model, but the implementation. We've actually seen studies where when CPOE was first rolled out, we saw decreased mortality, and then other studies that showed increased mortality. The exact same system. And why is that? It's because implementation was different. So we have to look at, when we look at outcomes, we have to do that. The third is around bias. And there's many things that we can focus on, but I'll give you the real basic thumbnail of what's easy. If the algorithm or model has a variable such as age, race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religious affiliation, anything that's a self-identifier, it should be flagged as something you should be looking to see whether or not those outcomes we're talking about are disproportionately or adversely affected relative to the general population. And if we don't look for that, we're not going to know whether it's working. And lastly, it's about governance. Somebody has to be overseeing this, and it has to be done in a streamlined manner. Now, the thing is, if we did this, and every organization across the country or the world captured this information in a way that was structured. We were all implementing it the same. We were all going to agree we're going to implement it. We're going to measure the same results. We could actually compare notes. And by comparing notes, we could actually create something called an AI outcomes registry. It'd be extraordinary, an opportunity for us to truly collaborate, and not only in the area of artificial intelligence, but allow us to be able to understand how our care is being delivered. It could be useful for researchers, clinicians, and a variety of other folks. So with that, I've given you sort of a brief overview of what's going on in AI and healthcare, but the opportunity is in front of us. We have an opportunity to take this amazing technology, apply it responsibly, but transform the lives of individuals for patients that we see today and patients that have not yet come in but could be part of the broader population. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rhew, for an innovative presentation. This plenary session has concluded. Please visit the exhibits and posters. Please also join us tonight for the welcome reception in the exhibit hall. Thank you very much.